What if the future of web development looks suspiciously like its past? No hydration errors, no complicated state management library, no enormous dependency folder, maybe not even a separate front-end application. While the rest of the industry races toward increasingly complicated frameworks, developers are suddenly paying attention to a tiny library that offers the exact opposite. It's called HTMX. But why is it having a moment now? And can a few HTML attributes genuinely replace React? The answer is more interesting than the hype. Let's start with the simplest possible explanation. Imagine a button on a website. In a typical React application, clicking that button might trigger JavaScript, send a request to an API, receive JSON, update client-side state, render a component, and synchronize the interface. HTMX asks a different question. What if the server simply returned the finished HTML? That is the basic HTMX model. You add attributes such as hxget, hxpost, or hxswap directly to an HTML element. When the user interacts with it, HTMX contacts the server, receives an HTML fragment, and places it into the page. There is no separate JSON to component transformation. The server sends the interface, not just the data. In other words, HTMX takes the traditional server-rendered website model and gives it modern, dynamic interactions. It sounds almost too simple. And for years, that simplicity was also the criticism. HTMX was often treated as a cute tool for small projects, not something you would use for a serious product. Then two things changed. The library received a major technical overhaul, and developers became increasingly tired of everything HTMX removes. The immediate news behind the renewed attention is HTMX4, and yes, it skipped version 3. HTMX creator Carson Gross had previously said there would never be an HTMX 3. When another major version eventually became necessary, the project jumped directly from version 2 to version 4. It's partly a technical decision and partly an excellent internet joke. But there is an important detail hidden behind some of the headlines. HTMX 4 is currently in beta. It has not completely replaced the stable HTMX 2 release. Still, the changes are significant. HTMX 4 replaces the older XML HTTP request system with the modern Fetch API. It simplifies parts of the library that had accumulated complexity, makes previously implicit behavior more explicit, and changes how browser history is handled. It also introduces features such as streaming responses and built-in DOM morphing. DOM morphing allows HTMX to intelligently merge new HTML into the existing page. That can preserve important elements and make an update feel smoother than simply deleting and rebuilding everything. These changes gave creators a timely headline, but a version update alone doesn't explain the enthusiasm. HTMX4 provided the spark. The fuel was already there. The larger story is framework fatigue. Modern front-end tools are incredibly powerful, but that power frequently arrives with several layers of complexity. A conventional application might include React, Next.js, a package manager, a bundler, server components, client-side routing, hydration, caching, state management, and a separate JSON API. Every layer exists for a reason. The question is whether every application needs every layer. A contact management system does not necessarily need the architecture of Google Docs. An internal dashboard does not necessarily need the front-end complexity of Figma. And an AI application that accepts a prompt and displays text may not require thousands of lines of client-side state management. This is the emotional appeal of HTMX. It gives developers permission to ask, what if my application is actually a website? What if the server remains responsible for the data and the interface? And what if the browser only needs to display HTML, send requests, and update part of the page? That idea feels almost rebellious today, not because it is new, but because the industry spent years moving in the opposite direction. Supporters of HTMX also have a compelling real-world example. Contexte, a media-oriented software company, replaced a React interface with server-rendered templates and HTMX. According to the published case study, the migration reduced the codebase by 67%. JavaScript dependencies fell from 255 to just 9. Build time dropped from 40 seconds to 5, and the initial interactive load became approximately 50 to 60% faster. Those numbers are difficult to ignore. But there is a detail that often disappears from dramatic headlines. Contexte primarily displays text, images, filters, and conventional application screens. It was almost an ideal application for a server-driven architecture. The case study does not prove that HTMX can replace React everywhere. It proves that some applications may be carrying far more front-end architecture than they actually need. HTMX is also benefiting from a wider return to simplicity movement. Developers are pairing it with tools such as Go, SQLite, Tailwind, and inexpensive virtual servers. The attraction is not just performance, it is ownership. One application, one small server, one database, one deployment. That story is particularly attractive to solo developers, small teams, and bootstrap startups that don't want an enterprise cloud architecture before they have their first 100 users. It also fits many AI products surprisingly well. In an AI wrapper, the expensive work often happens inside an external model. Your own server spends much of its time waiting for tokens to arrive. If the product is primarily forms, text, dashboards, and streamed responses, a lightweight server-rendered interface may be more than enough. HTMX doesn't magically make every AI application inexpensive, but it makes developers question why a simple AI interface needs such an elaborate front-end in the first place. This is where we need to separate the technology from the marketing. HTMX is often described as zero JavaScript. That isn't literally true. HTMX is a JavaScript library. The real benefit is that developers can create many dynamic interactions without writing and maintaining large amounts of custom JavaScript themselves. And moving complexity out of the browser does not make complexity disappear. The server now has more responsibility. It must manage routes, templates, database queries, application state, and potentially more network requests. HTMX simplifies one side of the system by placing more emphasis on the other. For the right application, that is a very good trade. For the wrong one, it can become a limitation. So, is HTMX replacing React? Not exactly. HTMX is an excellent fit for admin panels, dashboards, forms, search interfaces, content websites, internal tools, and conventional business applications. In these products, the server already owns most of the data, and the interface mainly needs fast partial updates. React remains valuable when a large amount of state must live inside the browser. Think visual editors, offline, first applications, complex drag-and-drop tools, games, data-heavy interfaces, and real-time collaborative products. You could attempt to build these with HTMX, but as the product becomes more like a desktop application and less like a website, you may find yourself fighting the server-driven model. The honest conclusion is not that React is dead. It is that React is no longer the automatic answer to every interface. HTMX is reclaiming the portion of the web that may never have needed a full, single-page application framework. That is why HTMX is suddenly interesting again. A major beta release supplied the news. Framework fatigue supplied the audience. Rising cloud costs supplied the urgency. And years of unnecessary front-end complexity supplied the perfect villain. HTMX is not revolutionary because it invented a new way to build websites. It is revolutionary because it reminds developers what the web could already do. The future may not belong to the most complicated stack. It may belong to the simplest architecture that solves the actual problem. Would you build your next project with HTMX? Or do modern applications still need modern front-end frameworks? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe for more breakdowns of the technologies changing how software gets built.